Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our live webinar, Addressing the Digital Skills Gap, Putting Pupils on the Path to Success with Turnitin Feedback Studio. I'm Lara and I'd like to start by going through the house rules. Whilst all microphones are muted, we do welcome questions, so please write them in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen and we will address them at the end of the webinar. After the webinar, we will send a recording so you can share it with your colleagues or also use it for your own reference. On today's agenda, we will discuss the skills gap that students face during their transition from secondary education to their university and career, and how we can bridge this gap. We'll then talk about academic integrity and how Turnitin technology can slot in as the keystone to success. Now, before I go through everything on the agenda, I'd like to begin by addressing the elephant in the room. With groundbreaking software that highlights matching sources in work, many refer to Turnitin as the plagiarism police. And as such, we have a few funny stories from teachers. They range from the ridiculous, a student making reference to imagining that someday soon we'll be able to make it to the moon in an essay written in the 21st century, to the blatantly obvious mismatch of text shades, to the downright bizarre, a student copying and pasting a paragraph of his teacher's own work without realizing. You've got to wonder about the chances of that happening. I'm actually astounded at this. Okay, well, let's pause for a poll. Who has seen something similar? You should see that pop up on your screen right now. And I would love to hear your stories. If you have any to share, please put them in the comment box and at the end we'll shout them out. Okay. Right, so the poll's still in process. I'll close that now, but I can see that most of you have said yes a few times, unfortunately, and some of you have also said all the time. So this really highlights the need to sort something out here. What can we do? The point of this is that we know teachers are fantastic about being vigilant to plagiarism, but as technology enables copying and pasting to be so much easier for students, we want to show you how the use of Turnitin Feedback Studio not only speeds up the similarity checking process, but also how it works as a plagiarism preventative, moving teachers away from a policing role and into a coaching role. Over the 20 years we've worked with educators, we've really looked into the reasons behind student plagiarism. And the recurring theme we see time and time again is that plagiarism stems from an unintentional place. Perhaps the student is struggling with the workload, under pressure to perform, and then procrastinates and panics as they run out of time. Other times it can be as simple as a lack of referencing knowledge or an inability to paraphrase. So there really is a skill gap here. From what educators have told us and our wider research, the skills that are most frequently found missing from students transitioning from secondary education are the soft skills that you can see listed on the slide. These are really necessary to be successful in both higher education and career, and the reason why qualifications such as the EPQ and BTECs are gaining popularity. Students really have the opportunity here to gain knowledge that they'll need, such as independent research skills, critical thinking and evaluation, time management, autonomy, and referencing. And it's clear why they are so highly regarded by universities and businesses alike. This is something we strive to help with at Turnitin. In an admissions survey conducted by the HE Advisors Conference, all admission officers unanimously agreed that students must be ready to learn and think independently. 62% also said that this is a skill most often found missing in students. We are amazed at how high this figure is. We really see that school leaders are aware that the current narrowly focused exam system is leaving students unprepared. Now, let me ask you this. If we don't equip students with the skills that they need to succeed, then how can we expect them to act with integrity? If students are struggling and desperate, then an increase of academic misconduct is inevitable. Now, perhaps you're thinking that inevitable is a strong word, and perhaps it is, but I say it with good reason. Because the scary part of all of this is that when students are struggling and in this vulnerable position, they now have access to outside influences that normalize cheating. This is becoming more and more prevalent in today's society. You may have heard of the essay writing company EduBirdie, who use social media stars to influence young people into academic misconduct. What is shocking is that these companies are so professional. How do we protect students from such sophisticated advertising campaigns? There is an ever-increasing amount of scandals being published, from politicians to the most esteemed universities. All of this shows that there is a strong need to address the academic skills gap early on and teach students to value academic integrity, whilst encouraging them to self-motivate throughout the learning process. The reason we at Turnitin encourage a holistic approach to academic integrity is because we recognise the need to help teachers build up both students' academic skills and also a strong moral code so they are properly prepared for education, higher education, and their career. We encourage use of Turnitin Feedback Studio not just as a similarity check at submission stage, but integrated throughout the learning process. If we allow students to analyse their similarity report, it encourages them to become independent thinkers. Are their sources of information appropriate? Should they have paraphrased a little bit better? They realise that they can't take the easy route by copying and pasting. Then, through our feedback functionality, teachers can give a much more in-depth analysis to students, which they can refer back to time and time again. Now, this is the real benefit of digitising assignments and feedback. Both students and teachers can easily see the level of progression and the areas that need to be improved upon. This means that students can feel confident at their current level, but also prepared for their future. I've talked a lot about preparing for HE, but I think it's really important to point out that building digital and academic skills is really crucial for the future workforce. In research from Microsoft, more than half of teachers believe that the current education system is failing to prepare students for a digital future. In a research from the Prince's Trust, they found that 43% of students felt underprepared for work and lacked the skills they needed. Now, this isn't just found in one study, it's a message mirrored across multiple sources. And all of this points towards the need for schools to be doing more to prepare students for their next step. What will happen if we don't listen to what universities and industry professionals are telling us? I'll close this section of the webinar with Russell Knight's take on the matter. He really hammers home the importance of closing the digital skills gap. But how do we do this? Right, we've talked about the academic integrity and how it's really important and can build the bridge that crosses the gap from secondary education to higher education. But where does technology fit in? What role can it play and who is it useful for? Before we dive into some of the benefits of Turnitin Feedback Studio, I really thought it would be interesting to see what the view of EdTech is from the top level. Anne Milton, Apprenticeship and Skills Minister, has put a huge focus on the time-saving element technology can provide to reduce workload. Something that in just a few slides' time, we're going to show you how Turnitin Feedback Studio can support you in doing just that. Damien Hines, our Education Secretary, also agrees that EdTech has a pivotal role that can support our curriculum and reduce teacher workload while supporting our students. So the focus is really twofold, using EdTech to support and enrich the learning and using EdTech to reduce teacher workload. And on this note as well, the government have actually released a new EdTech strategy today, looking at how tech companies can work with schools and college to cut teacher workload, support professional development, and improve student outcomes. So this really, really is relevant. So I think we can all agree the benefits to student needs to be the center of focus here. So what does a digital workflow do for them? Well, firstly, you're giving them feedback in the place they're most used to, online. With the age of social media, online feedback is the new norm and schools need to keep up. Our study into the efficacy of Turnitin Feedback Studio found that online feedback is far more engaging for students. Also, I'm sure that you can think back to situations where you handed out work in a class and a student is embarrassed about their mark in front of their peers. Now, that work gets thrown away or lost without the student really taking in and reflecting on that feedback, which is so important. With a digital workflow, on the other hand, students can review their work at a time and place which is really comfortable for them to do so. As I'll show you in a few slides' time, our software can really help encourage students to self-motivate and really encourage critical thinking. We'll also show you how we can ensure consistent marking and how this can improve student writing outcomes by ensuring that they are getting the feedback that helps them the most. As we all know, recruitment and retention are really huge threats to the teacher workforce. Our Education Secretary, Damien Hines, recognises, unsurprisingly, that this is largely due to workload. If we look at this graph, for example, the top reasons for thinking about leaving by a really large margin are the volume of workload and seeking a better work-life balance. Now, I have a little GIF here for you. I think it really sums up teachers' current workload in a nutshell. Right. We've already seen that the government think EdTech can help exponentially in this area, but how? Time saving. Teachers on average save 38% of time on marking with Turnitin Feedback Studio. Sharing best practice and developing teachers' marking skills. Feedback Studio allows teachers to share commonly used feedback and rubrics. Ensure consistency and provide accountability amongst departments. Really access students' work easily and mark anywhere on different devices. And this enables a greater understanding of aptitude and prior attainments of students, which is really useful to take into consideration when planning lessons, assessing student work, and also evaluating progress. Imagine how much more efficient you can be with your time. There's no more carrying around boxes of work which have potential to be lost. You could mark papers on your commute on your iPad, provided that you aren't driving, of course. Turnitin can help support and enrich the learning process and really make the workload more manageable. If the impact on pupils' progress doesn't match the hours spent, then stop it. Concentrate on feedback which is meaningful, manageable, and motivating. These are the statements made by Ofsted and the Department of Education addressing the workload issue. The phrase "easier said than done" comes to mind. We made a comparison between how many steps it takes to provide quality marking and feedback to students manually versus Turnitin Feedback Studio. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a manual workflow, going through, checking for plagiarism, checking spelling and grammar, locating marking criteria, providing a mark and feedback. There are so many steps to go through for every piece of work, and this really takes time that could be used better elsewhere, whether it be with your students or catching up with your personal life. So let us streamline this for you. Look at how much faster it is on the left-hand side of the screen, and you can get through the same workflow so much quicker with Turnitin Feedback Studio. We really want to support you in being as time efficient and effective as possible. So let's take a look at Turnitin Feedback Studio in action. We'll show you how it can aid bridging the skills gap and really make your workload more manageable. Now, as we start showing you a little bit more about how Turnitin Feedback Studio can help, we're going to follow a similar workflow to how many of our teachers use our platform, initially checking that the student's work is actually their own. Now, looking at the screen, we can see straight away which sources the student have used to obtain their information in the student's work if they have referenced that source. We'll bring all the information together for a teacher to make an informed decision in a more time-efficient and comprehensive manner on what constitutes as plagiarism. And you can really start to see how valuable this is from a teaching perspective. By showing students where and why they need to reference, you are teaching them to be independent thinkers and critical of the sources that they use. Not only that, but you can start to see how much time this can save marking work. Now, one of the really powerful aspects of Turnitin Feedback Studio is the ETS E-rater. This automatically checks student work for grammar, mechanics, style, usage, and spelling, allowing students to develop their writing skills independently by providing automated feedback. In turn, this enables you to spend your time on giving feedback on the student's actual content, the type of feedback that they find most helpful. Not only do students receive consistent writing feedback in every class they submit work through Feedback Studio, but you can also see the drastic reduction on workload. Now, how many times do you see yourself using similar comments over and over again? Quick marks are pre-saved comments that you can create in advance or on the fly to quickly drag and drop feedback into students' work. Now you can really start to see how easy this can become to mark papers when you have a comprehensive database of these built up. We all know that marking a lot of papers in one sitting can be tough, especially when you have to maintain consistency between papers. Quick marks enables you to do just that. Every student is getting that rich and detailed feedback that enhances the learning process and reduces your workload. Sometimes you just want to leave some overall feedback at the end of a piece of work, so you can do just that. Another really valuable feature of Turnitin Feedback Studio is the ability to leave voice comments. Many teachers love this because students can hear the tone of voice, which really complements written feedback because students know that it's meant to be constructive and not negative. Now, this method is a really great way to ensure students are actually engaging with the comments that you're leaving them. So rubrics allow for more consistent marking and give students a greater understanding of how they've achieved their final mark. That's why we built rubric options into Turnitin Feedback Studio. You have two options, either opening up the full rubric or using the intuitive sliders on the right, which will automatically calculate the mark. It's easy to imagine how quickly that you could get through a large volume of student work which needs to be marked, whilst also really maintaining that high level of consistency to ensure that students' work is marked fairly. So what does all this mean in a practical sense? It means on average a 38% reduction in time taken to mark a paper. It means consistency in marking in between departments. You can share best practices between teachers. Imagine an NPT joining your school, immediately having access to your school's rubrics and a built-up database of quick marks for them to really hit the ground running. You are also creating a culture of academic integrity and protecting your institution's reputation. We get a number of calls from schools that left it too late and approached us after the exam boards have flagged up plagiarism and have had to strip their students of their marks. Now, really, isn't it better to be proactive than reactive? In order to show you how effective Turnitin Feedback Studio really is, we looked at 2.1 million student submissions and analysed the data. We can see here on the graph the average percent of similarity score against papers submitted. Look at the huge reductions from our highest percentage group. Not only that, but we can also see a small initial increase from the lowest group. So what's going on here? Right, well, our highest percentage of students are becoming more mindful of their writing processes, and our lowest percentage of students are realizing that they're not including enough sources and external information within their work. Now, this really means that students are entering university, college, apprenticeship with the right skills that they need to fulfill their academic potential. They've already experienced Turnitin Feedback Studio and really know what's expected of them in regards to both academic referencing and the importance of original writing. They become independent thinkers and really learn the necessary skills to incorporate critically appraised ideas into their own work in an academically ethical manner. So what have we covered today? We've talked about the skills gap between secondary education, higher education, and the workforce, which is really leaving students unprepared for the digital future. We've talked about how a gap in the skills required can also be the root cause of academic misconduct. So it's crucial to address the skills and academic integrity throughout the learning process. And finally, we've also shown you how Turnitin's technology can reduce teacher workload, increase student engagement, build skills needed, and create a culture of academic integrity. Right, so thank you so much for attending. Now I'll leave you with a question. How would you use Turnitin Feedback Studio in your institution? Many schools use Turnitin for EPQ, BTECs, A-levels with written elements like history, geography, English, but do you see use somewhere else? We only showed you a snapshot of what we can do. So if you'd like to book in an online demo to see how we can help in areas specific for your institution, please contact me and I would be really happy to help you further. And that really brings us to the end of the webinar. Now, if you do have an extra 5 minutes, please stick around for our Q&A. And if you have any questions, now is the time to put them in the comment box. Right, okay. I can see that there's some in the box already. I'll try to answer as many as we can, but we do want to get you out on time. Don't worry though, if your question isn't answered, we will send you an email after the webinar. Okay. So we've got one here saying, do UK awarding bodies use Turnitin? And yes, that's the answer. All major awarding bodies in the UK use Turnitin Feedback Studio as part of their quality assurance process. And as such, if you're using Turnitin Feedback Studio, all work is checked to the same standard. Right, we've got another one here asking if essay-based assignments are the only type of document that can be submitted. And the answer to that is no. Any document can be submitted to Turnitin Feedback Studio. For example, if an art teacher wanted to use the feedback functionality, they could upload images and provide grading and feedback for the work. A lot of institutions actually use it for PowerPoint, so if a student has to present in class, teachers can get them to upload presentations the day before and then give feedback on the presentation live as the student presents in class, which is really, really valuable and a great way to use it. Right, I think we have time for one more question, so I'll just have a little look at what I can answer. Okay, right, how quickly can we get this implemented in our school? So as soon as we get a signed quote, we can roll this out really, really quickly. The general turnaround is 48 hours, but if you have a use case to have this earlier, then we can usually get this quicker for you as well. Okay, perfect. Well, that will really bring me to the end of the webinar. Now, if you do have any more questions, then please don't hesitate to email me. It's right there on the screen for you, or do call as well for that online demo. Right, so thank you again for attending, and we'll end the webinar here. We hope to hear from you soon. Bye.